Now that we've discussed the online certification directory and the information sheet, we're going to look at both and go through an example of how to fill out the information sheet and go over a couple examples to show more clearly what exactly it is we're looking for. Now on the right is the information sheet, and at the top is the applicant information. That is the person who's going to own the file, who pays the bills, and makes all of the decisions. The manufacturer information is the person who actually makes the product. Whether in this case, it's going to be the person who sews the garments. We need both of those filled out so we know who to contact if something goes wrong. Looking at the next section, it's the finished garment information. Now that is, you can have as many different garments as you would like, and we just need information about each one. So in this case, we have a coat. We're going to call it the superheat resistant number 1, and that name is the name that's going to show up on the certificate at the end of the project. So whatever you want to call it, that's what we need you to fill in right there. And then we'll go through the closures. We can fill that in after we've looked at the garment. And the reversible closure is something that we can see after we've seen the garment, and we can fill that in. If you know it immediately, you can fill that information in as well. In the next section, we have the outer shell and the thermal barrier fabric information. This we've pre-filled in, but it gives an example of what we're looking for as far as the fabric name, weight, and composition. Scrolling down, we're going to go to the moisture barrier information. Now this we're going to walk through an example using the certificate directory. On the left, we're going to fill in the UL category code of QGVG2, which means 1971 components. And we're going to type in a keyword of moisture barrier to help narrow our search. And we have 4 recognized component suppliers. We're just going to pick one for this example. And we'll pick the first one here, the FR Fabric 89-85. And that goes in the fabric model or style area. The supplier in this case is Alpex Protection. And the seam tape is something that the moisture barrier supplier will tell you based on the seam sealer machine that you have. So they'll tell you what that information is. As you can see in our pre-filled example here, we've got the seam seal information for our other moisture barrier in this case, which is Steadair 3000. So for Alpex, we're going to determine what that is based on what that particular moisture barrier requires, and we'll fill that information in. And the next section is the composite identification. Now this is pretty important. So here we need the garment manufacturer to tell us what different composites they're going to be using. Sometimes we're going to use the same thermal barrier for a couple different outer shells. Sometimes we're going to switch it all up. In this case, we're going to have the FR Fabric 8985 be the moisture barrier for the Advance and the Omni Vantage outer shells. And in this case, both of those use a different thermal barrier. The reason this is important is we're going to have to test each of these composites to the THL and the TPP test. Scrolling down further, you can see there's other areas of the garment that we're going to need information on, and you can fill that out using the same process that we just did, looking up the QGVG2 and your keyword thread or reflective trim or whatever else you're needing. And you'll get a list there of folks who already have a recognized component. Now, if you're saying, I'm not going to use a recognized thread component or a recognized label component, what do? Well, you just go to that area and you type it in. In this case, we're going to buy our labels from Dragon Label Supplier, and we've typed in their model name and the composition for that label. And that is what Dragon Label calls that label. However, in our imaginary situation here, for our company, the garment manufacturer, we're going to call that label label number 1. And for your intents and purposes and our intents and purposes, it's important to know that, and we can note that in your file as well. So if you want to add that in there, we'll make sure that that gets added to the file so it's easier for you to see which label is which. And that is how you fill out an information sheet.